Have you ever wondered how many times we pass by angels in disguise without noticing? How many opportunities for change we ignore because we're too busy just surviving? The October rain in Toronto spared no one. Sarah Mitchell pulled her coat tighter against her body as she ran down Bloor Street, her second-hand boots splashing in the puddles forming on the uneven sidewalks. The biting wind carried the familiar scent of Canadian autumn, wet leaves, damp earth, and that cold promise of winter approaching. "Mom, I'm cold." Jamie's voice echoed from the back seat of her 2003 Honda Civic, which she had parked in front of the pharmacy. "Just one more minute, sweetie. Mommy just needs to pick up your cough medicine." Sarah forced a smile in the rearview mirror, watching her 5-year-old son huddled in the seat, his nose red from the cold. It was the third time that month Jamie had gotten sick. The apartment they could afford in East Europe didn't have proper insulation, and she knew the constant dampness and cold didn't help. But it was what her two jobs, office cleaning in the morning and working at a cafe in the afternoon, could afford. Inside the pharmacy, Sarah calculated mentally while waiting in line. $42 for the cough syrup the pediatrician had recommended. That meant instant noodles for another week, and maybe she could stretch the powdered milk until the next paycheck. Jamie didn't need to know that Mommy sometimes skipped dinner to make sure he ate well. "Card or cash?" asked the cashier with a professional smile. "Card." Sarah handed over her debit card, silently praying it would go through. The small machine beeped with approval, and she sighed in relief. When she left the pharmacy, the rain had intensified. Through the foggy windshield, she saw a figure hunched over a motorcycle parked at the edge of the street, about 50 meters from where she had parked. The man wore a dark leather jacket and seemed to be struggling with something in the bike's engine. Sarah hesitated. Every fiber of her urban survival instinct screamed at her to get in the car and leave. She was a woman alone with a child, it was almost dark, and this wasn't exactly Toronto's safest neighborhood. But something in the man's defeated posture, the way he lifted his head to the sky as if pleading for a break from the storm, touched something deep in her heart. She knew that feeling. The feeling of being completely alone against the world. "Mom, what's that man doing?" Jamie had turned in his seat to look out the back window. "It looks like his motorcycle broke down, sweetie. Is he going to be okay?" Jamie's innocent question echoed in Sarah's mind. How many times had she silently asked herself the same question over the past 5 years? How many times had she been alone in the rain, literally or metaphorically, wondering if anyone would stop to help? "Wait here, Jamie. I'm going to see if I can help." "But Mom, you said we shouldn't talk to strangers." "You're right, sweetie. But sometimes..." Sarah paused, searching for the right words. "Sometimes we need to be the kind of person we wish existed in the world." Sarah started the car and slowly drove over to the motorcycle. She rolled down the window just enough to speak, keeping the doors locked. "Hi. Is everything okay? Do you need help?" The man raised his head, and Sarah was surprised to see an older face than she had expected, maybe in his 60s, with gray hair stuck to his forehead from the rain and tired eyes that seemed to carry the weight of the world. He wasn't the troubled young man her mind had conjured. "Oh, thank you for stopping." His voice had an accent she couldn't place, but it was polite, almost refined. "The bike just died. I think it might be the battery, but I'm not sure." Sarah looked at Jamie in the rearview mirror. He was watching everything with wide, curious eyes. She thought about the lesson she was teaching him right now, about compassion, about helping others even when you're struggling yourself. "Look, I don't know anything about motorcycles, but I can give you a ride to a gas station or something. There's a Canadian Tire a few kilometers from here." The man hesitated, clearly weighing his options. The rain was soaking him completely, and the temperature was dropping quickly. "Are you sure?" I don't want to bother you. I could call a cab or… Actually, Sarah interrupted, I don't think you'll get a cab quickly in this weather. And you'll get sick if you stay out here. There was something in his voice, a vulnerability hidden behind the politeness, that resonated with her own struggles. Maybe it was the way he tried to make it seem like everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. Sarah knew that performance all too well. I'm Sarah, and this is Jamie. She waved to her son. He's a little sick, so sorry if he coughs. William, he replied, moving closer to the window. And thank you very much. This is very kind of you. As William walked around the car to get into the passenger seat, Sarah wondered what she was doing. Her life was complicated enough without adding strangers into the equation. But there was something about helping someone that made her feel, not exactly strong, but as though she had a purpose beyond just surviving the next day. Hi. Jamie greeted William as soon as he sat down, his natural shyness overcome by curiosity. Why did your motorcycle break? William laughed, and it was a genuine sound that filled the small car with warmth. Good question, little one. Sometimes things just stop working, even when we think they're fine. Sarah glanced at him sideways as she pulled out of the parking lot. There was something in the way he said that, like he was talking about more than just the motorcycle. Do you live here in Toronto? She asked, navigating through the slow traffic caused by the rain. Not exactly. I'm passing through the city. Doing a sort of journey. What kind of journey? William was silent for a moment, looking out the window at the city lights reflected in the puddles. The kind where you try to figure out who you really are when you peel away all the layers the world puts on you. The answer caught Sarah off guard. It wasn't what she expected from a stranded motorcyclist. There was a philosophical depth in his words that suggested education, life experience, maybe even wisdom earned the hard way. Mom's on a journey too, Jamie announced from the back seat. She always says we're building our life brick by brick. Sarah felt her face flush. Jamie. It's true, he insisted. You always say that even when things are hard, we're building something better. William turned to look at Jamie, then at Sarah. Brick by brick. I like that. Sounds like a solid life philosophy. My son is 5 and already wiser than I am, Sarah said, trying to shift the attention away from herself. I doubt that. William's voice was soft, but it carried conviction. A mother who stops to help a stranger in the rain, with her son in the car, tells me a lot about your wisdom. They drove in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the rhythmic sound of the rain on the roof creating an intimate atmosphere. Sarah found herself relaxing for the first time in weeks. There was something about William's presence, a calm, a lack of judgment, that made her feel less alone in the world. There's the Canadian Tire, she pointed, signaling to pull into the parking lot. Sarah, William said as she parked, can I ask you a question? Sure. What made you stop? In your position, with a child in the car, most people wouldn't have stopped. Sarah turned off the engine and faced him. It was a fair question, and she realized she didn't have a simple answer. Honestly? I don't know. Maybe because… She paused, searching for the right words. Maybe because I know what it's like to be alone when things go wrong. And maybe because I want Jamie to grow up knowing that there are always people willing to help. William nodded slowly, as if she had confirmed something he already suspected. Thank you, Sarah. For more than just the ride. As she watched him walk toward the store, Sarah wondered if she would ever know what that serendipitous encounter had truly meant. She had no way of knowing that her simple decision to stop, motivated by nothing more than basic human compassion, was about to change her life in ways she could never have imagined. In fact, she had no idea that the man she had just helped wasn't just on a personal journey of self-discovery. He was documenting his own experience for a project that would explore how genuine kindness still existed in the world, and she had just become the perfect example. Before we continue, if this story is touching your heart as much as it touched mine, please leave a like to show that you believe in the power of human kindness. Red heart. And if you want to discover how Sarah's simple decision will completely transform her life and little Jamie's, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you won't miss any chapter of this emotional journey. In the comments, tell me, have you ever helped a stranger without expecting anything in return? Or perhaps someone has done that for you? Your stories inspire others to be better. Dizzy. Backhand index pointing up, like, subscribe, and let's discover together how a simple act of kindness can change lives forever. Now, let's move on to Chapter 2. There is a special kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying the entire world on your shoulders. It's the kind of tiredness that doesn't disappear with a good night's sleep because it's in the soul. The small apartment on the second floor of the East York building seemed even smaller when Sarah and Jamie arrived home. The thin walls let in the sounds from the neighbors, the baby crying next door, the loud TV from the elderly couple upstairs, and the constant comings and goings of people on the poorly lit stairs. "Mom, can I watch cartoons?" Jamie asked, taking off his wet jacket and hanging it on the low hook Sarah had installed especially for him. "Of course, sweetie. But first, let's take your medicine, okay?" Sarah looked around the place they called home. The second-hand couch she had bought on Kijiji was still sturdy, even with the slightly faded cover. The 32-inch TV, a Christmas gift to herself 2 years ago, dominated the main wall. A small dining table for two, a few toys neatly arranged in a wicker basket, and photographs of Jamie stuck to the fridge completed the decor. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. As she prepared Jamie's cough syrup, Sarah found herself thinking about William. There was something about him that intrigued her, not just his distinctive appearance or the expensive motorcycle she had briefly noticed, but the way he had looked at Jamie. No judgment, no pity, but with a sort of respectful recognition. "Mom, that man was nice," Jamie commented, snuggling into the couch with his favorite teddy bear. "Yes, he seemed to be." Sarah sat next to him, adjusting the apartment's temperature. The heating was working, but she always kept it a few degrees lower to save on the energy bill. Why was he alone? Jamie's innocent question touched something deep in Sarah's chest. Why was anyone alone? Sometimes, life circumstances just converged in a way that left you isolated, fighting alone against tides that seemed to want to drag you down. Sometimes people need time alone to discover important things about themselves, she answered, stroking his hair. Like you did when Daddy left? Sarah swallowed hard. Jamie rarely spoke about his father, but when he did, it always took her by surprise. Marcus had left their lives when Jamie was just 2, claiming he wasn't ready for the responsibility of fatherhood. He sent an occasional birthday card and $200 at Christmas, but his involvement in Jamie's life pretty much ended there. Yes, kind of. Sarah pulled Jamie closer. But you know what? I've discovered that we're an amazing family, just the 2 of us. We're the best. Jamie laughed, pulling a funny face that made Sarah smile for real. As Jamie watched cartoons, Sarah went into the small kitchen to prepare dinner. She opened the fridge and did her usual mental inventory. Milk should last for 3 more days, eggs, 5 left, some slices of ham, carrots, a package of pasta, and canned sauce. Scrambled eggs with ham again. As she cooked, her mind wandered back to William. There was something in the way he spoke about being on a journey, about discovering who he really was when all the layers were stripped away. Sarah wondered what it would be like to have that luxury, the luxury of questioning, of exploring, of having time for self-discovery. Her own journey over the past 5 years had been about pure survival. Waking up at 5 in the morning for the cleaning shift, rushing home to take Jamie to subsidized daycare, then heading to the cafe where she worked from 2 to 8 in the evening. Weekends were for laundry, grocery shopping at No Frills where the sales were better, and desperate attempts to spend quality time with Jamie. Self-discovery? Sarah barely had time to figure out whether she preferred coffee or tea in the morning. "Dinner's ready, my love." They ate at the small table, Jamie chattering about his day at daycare, about the new song he had learned, about how his friend Dylan had brought a really cool toy to show. "Mom," Jamie suddenly said, "are you happy?" The question hit her like a punch to the stomach. Sarah stopped with her fork halfway to her mouth. "What kind of question is that, Jamie?" "It's just that you always seem tired. And sometimes you look out the window with a sad face." From the lips of a child. Sarah felt her eyes burn, but forced a smile. "I'm very happy, sweetie. Especially when I'm with you. Sometimes adults get tired because they work a lot, but that doesn't mean we're not happy." "Okay." Jamie seemed to accept the explanation, but Sarah could see that he was still processing. After dinner, Sarah bathed Jamie and tucked him into bed. While reading to him a book borrowed from the library about a little train that managed to climb a steep mountain, she wondered if her own mountains would ever get any less steep. "Mom," Jamie whispered as she was turning off the light, "thank you for helping that man today." "Why, sweetheart?" "Because it was the right thing to do. And you always do what's right." After Jamie fell asleep, Sarah allowed herself a moment of quiet that she rarely had. She sat on the couch with a cup of tea, looking out the window at the city lights. The rain had stopped, but the streets still gleamed under the streetlights. She thought about Jamie's question. Was she happy? The answer was complicated. There were moments of pure joy, like when Jamie laughed at something silly she did, or when he surprised her with a drawing he made at daycare. But there was also a constant weight, a background anxiety that never quite disappeared. Sarah grabbed her phone and checked her bank account. $243 until the next payday on Friday. Rent, utilities, food, gas, medical care for Jamie. There was always a $50 gap to make the bills close comfortably. It was in those moments that she felt the weight of being alone most intensely. There was no one to share the worries with, no one to take turns when she was at the edge of exhaustion, no one to say it's going to be okay in a way that she actually believed. Her parents had offered help in the beginning, but always with implied conditions. If you went back to Thunder Bay. If you considered giving Jamie up for adoption. If you tried to make amends with Marcus. The well-meaning suggestions came loaded with judgment about her life choices. Sarah had learned that it was easier to fight alone than to constantly justify herself. Across the city, in a hotel room at the King Edward, William Chin sat on the edge of the bed, looking at a small camera in his hands. He had spent the last 15 years building a tech empire worth billions. He'd been recognized by Forbes, spoken at TED Talks, dined with prime ministers and CEOs of the world's biggest corporations. But he had never felt as far from himself as he had in the past few months. The death of his wife the previous year had been the catalyst. Margaret had always said he'd lost himself in his success, that he'd forgotten the idealistic young man she had known in college. William thought she was exaggerating, until he found himself alone in a 20-room mansion in Vancouver, surrounded by all the symbols of his success, feeling emptier than he ever had before. The idea for the documentary had come up during a conversation with his adult daughter, Elena. "Dad," she had said, "when was the last time you did something that had nothing to do with business or profit? When was the last time you just helped someone because it was the right thing to do?" William couldn't answer. Thus, his project was born, traveling the country by motorcycle, putting himself in situations where he would rely on the kindness of strangers, documenting these interactions to show the world that human compassion still existed. He had hired a small team of documentarians who followed him discreetly, capturing these moments of genuine human connection. Sarah had been one of those moments. And something about her effortless kindness, about the way she had stopped to help even with so many responsibilities of her own, had touched something deep in his heart. William opened his laptop and began typing his reflections for the day. Day 23 of the journey. Today I met a woman named Sarah. Single mother, clearly struggling financially, but stopped to help a stranger in the rain. There was something in her kindness that reminded me why I started this project. She didn't stop because she had time or resources to spare. She stopped because it was who she chose to be. He paused, looking out the hotel window at the same city where Sarah was, at this moment, worrying about how she would pay all the bills next month. I need to know more about her story. There's something about her that tells me this journey isn't just about documenting kindness, it's about learning to recognize true courage when we see it. William closed the laptop, knowing their lives would cross again. He just didn't know yet how it would change everything for both of them. Sometimes, the universe conspires to place us exactly where we need to be. Other times, we unconsciously seek out the places where our souls feel at home. Sarah's alarm went off at 4:45 a.m., as it did every weekday. For a moment, she lay still in bed, listening to Jamie's soft breathing in the next room and trying to muster the energy for another day. October was already showing its coldest face, and she could feel the cold air seeping in through the poorly sealed windows of the apartment. Another day, Sarah. You can do this, she murmured to herself, repeating the mantra that had sustained her for 5 years. The morning routine was a well-choreographed dance. A quick shower, instant coffee, gently waking Jamie, preparing him for another day at Mrs. Martinez's daycare. Jamie was always more affectionate in the morning, clinging to her like a sleepy koala while she dressed him. "Mom, will you come back earlier today?" he asked, rubbing his eyes. "Unfortunately not, sweetie. But Mrs. Martinez said you'll be doing arts and crafts today. Can you make me a drawing? I'm going to draw you riding a motorcycle." Jamie laughed, fully awake now with his own idea. Sarah laughed too, but the mention of the motorcycle brought William back to her thoughts. She had dreamed of him the night before, not romantically, but in some long conversation where he listened to her talk about her fears and hopes. Strange how some casual encounters stuck in your memory. At 5:30 a.m., Sarah dropped Jamie off at Mrs. Martinez's house, an Ecuadorian woman who took care of children in her apartment on the ground floor of the same building. It was an imperfect solution. Jamie was with many other kids, and Sarah knew he wasn't getting the one-on-one attention he deserved, but it was what she could afford. "Buen dia, mija," Mrs. Martinez greeted, already in her apron and the smell of coffee and cinnamon wafting from her kitchen. "Jamie, van aca, tango pancakes." "Thanks, Elena. I'll pick him up at 8, as usual." Of course, of course. Be careful, Mija. It's very cold today." Cleaning offices in Toronto's financial district was physically demanding but mentally relaxing. Sarah could put on her headphones and lose herself in podcasts or music while vacuuming carpets in offices that cost more than she earned in a year. There was a bitter irony in cleaning spaces where people made decisions that moved millions while she worried about cents. But it was honest work, and she had learned to find dignity even in the humblest tasks. At 12:30, Sarah found herself at the Tim Hortons near the Canadian Tire where she had dropped off William the night before. It wasn't her usual route home, but she felt an odd compulsion to pass by, perhaps hoping to see that everything had gone well with his motorcycle. And there he was. William was sitting at one of the tables in the back, a large coffee in front of him and a laptop open. He had changed out of his wet leather jacket and into a dark gray cashmere sweater that clearly hadn't come from a regular department store. Even so, there was something approachable about his posture. He didn't have that arrogance she associated with people who clearly had money. For a moment, she hesitated. Would it be strange to approach someone she had only helped once? But then William looked up and saw her. His face lit up with a genuine smile, and he waved for her to come over. Sarah! What a wonderful surprise! He closed the laptop and stood slightly, in a gesture of politeness that caught her off guard. Please, sit down. Can I offer you a coffee? Oh, I don't want to interrupt. Sarah began, but William was already signaling to the attendant. You're not interrupting anything. Actually, I was hoping to have a chance to thank you properly. Sarah sat down, curious. Did you manage to fix the motorcycle? Yes, thanks to you. It was the battery, just like I suspected. But that's not why I want to thank you. The attendant came to the table. What will it be for you, dear? She asked with the Quebecois accent Sarah had grown used to in Toronto. A medium coffee, double, please. And one of those blueberry muffins, William added. 2, actually. Sarah was about to protest. She hadn't ordered anything to eat, but something in William's expression made her accept graciously. What else do you want to thank me for? She asked once they were alone again. William leaned forward, his hands wrapping around the coffee cup. For reminding me of something I had forgotten. What was that? That there are still people who do the right thing simply because it's the right thing. Without expecting anything in return, without calculating what they're going to gain from it. Sarah laughed, a little uncomfortable with the praise. It wasn't a big deal. Anyone would have done the same. Do you really believe that? The question made her pause. Mentally, Sarah revisited how many people had driven by William the night before without stopping. How many times had she herself passed situations where she could have helped but didn't, because she was too caught up in her own problems? Maybe not just anyone, she admitted. But it wasn't heroism. It was just instinct. Exactly. William's eyes lit up. And that says a lot about who you are at your core. The muffins arrived, and Sarah realized she was starving. She had skipped lunch to save money, planning to eat something when she got home. Tell me about yourself, Sarah. Besides being someone who saves lost motorcyclists in the rain. Sarah took a piece of muffin, trying to decide how much to share. There was something about William that inspired trust, but she had learned to be cautious. Especially with men who seemed to have their lives much more organized than hers. There's not much to tell. I'm a single mom, I work 2 jobs, trying to give my son a good life. Jamie, right? He seems like a special boy. He is my whole life. Sarah's voice softened automatically when she spoke about her son. Sometimes I think he's more mature than I am. And his father? The question came softly, without judgment, but Sarah still felt the familiar pang of pain and anger. He's not part of our lives. His choice. William nodded, not pressing for more details. It must be hard doing everything alone. It is. Sarah was surprised by her own honesty. But it also taught me that I'm stronger than I thought I was. Tell me more about that. And somehow, Sarah found herself doing exactly that. Maybe it was because William listened without judgment, or because it had been so long since anyone had shown a genuine interest in her story, but she started talking. She told him how she had gotten pregnant at 22, how Marcus had promised they'd make it work, how he had gradually drifted away when he realized being a father meant real sacrifice. She told him about the sleepless nights with a baby who cried nonstop, about learning to change diapers by watching YouTube videos, about the first time Jamie said mommy and how her heart almost exploded with happiness and terror at the same time. What scares me the most, she said, stirring the sugar that had settled at the bottom of her cup, is that sometimes I feel like I'm just surviving. Like I'm on a treadmill, running as fast as I can but never getting anywhere. And how would you like it to be different? The question caught Sarah off guard. When was the last time someone had asked about her dreams instead of just her problems? I wish. She paused, feeling unexpected tears sting her eyes. I wish I could give Jamie things I never had. Maybe piano lessons. Trips to places beyond Toronto. A house with a backyard where he could have a dog. And for you? What would you want for yourself? Sarah laughed, but it was a sound without joy. Honestly? Sometimes I just wish I could sleep 8 hours straight without worrying if there's enough money for the power bill. William was silent for a long moment, studying her face. Sarah felt exposed, as if she had revealed too much about her vulnerabilities to a near stranger. Sorry, she said quickly. I don't know why I'm unloading all my problems on you. You must have your own. Sarah. William's voice was firm but kind. Don't apologize for being human. And don't apologize for struggling. What you're doing, raising a child on your own, working 2 jobs, still finding space in your heart to help strangers, that's not just survival. That's extraordinary courage. Sarah looked at him, searching for signs of pity or condescension, but found only sincerity. You speak as if you know something about struggle, she said. A sad smile crossed William's face. Maybe not the kind you know. But struggle, nonetheless. What kind of work do you do? Sarah asked, realizing that the conversation had been entirely about her. Technology, William answered vaguely. But lately I've been more interested in people. In stories like yours. Why? William looked out the window of the Tim Hortons, where people were walking quickly on the sidewalk, all seeming to have important places to be. Because I've spent so much time in boardrooms and not enough time in places like this, having conversations like this. And I'm starting to realize I may have spent too much time focusing on the wrong things. Sarah glanced at her phone and jumped. Oh God, I have to go. I need to pick up Jamie, and I still have to work at the cafe this afternoon. She started to get up, but William stopped her with a gentle gesture. Sarah, can I ask you a strange question? Sure. If you could change one thing in your life right now, something practical that would make the biggest difference for you and Jamie, what would it be? Sarah frowned, confused by the question. Why do you want to know? Curiosity. Sometimes people's answers surprise me. Sarah thought for a moment. Honestly? A car that works properly. Mine is always breaking down, and every repair is a small financial crisis. If I could rely on getting to work every day, I'd sleep much better. William nodded slowly. That makes sense. Why the question? Like I said, curiosity. William stood as she did. It was really nice talking to you, Sarah. I hope our paths cross again. I hope so too. As she walked back to her car, Sarah found herself thinking about the conversation. There was something about William she couldn't quite figure out. He clearly had education and resources, but there was no air of superiority about him. And the way he listened, really listened, was something she hadn't experienced in a long time. What she didn't know was that William was already on the phone with his assistant in Vancouver, asking for information on how best to help a single mother without making it seem like charity. He also didn't know yet that his decision to help Sarah was going to be more complicated than he had imagined, and that she would resist in ways he didn't expect. Because Sarah Mitchell had learned, the hard way, that accepting help often came with a price she wasn't willing to pay. There is a fundamental difference between wanting to help and knowing how to help. And sometimes, the person who needs help the most is also the one who resists it the most. 3 days after the conversation at Tim Hortons, Sarah was having one of those mornings that tested every limit of her patience. The Honda had refused to start on the first try, making that tired engine noise she knew too well. Jamie had a low-grade fever but insisted he wasn't sick because he didn't want to miss a friend's birthday party from daycare. "Mom, please. I promise I'll take the medicine," Jamie begged, his fever-flushed cheeks contrasting with his bright eyes full of hope. Sarah placed her hand on his forehead again. It wasn't high enough to be worrisome, but high enough to leave her torn between maternal responsibility and the desire not to disappoint her son. "Okay, but if you feel worse, we'll go home right away, okay?" "I promise." The car finally started on the third try, but the sound wasn't promising. Sarah knew she'd probably have to take it to the mechanic soon, and just the thought of the bill made her stomach tighten. At work, she couldn't stop thinking about the conversation with William. There was something about the way he had asked about one practical thing that could change her life. The question had seemed too specific to be just casual curiosity. At 2 p.m., when she arrived at Grind Coffee, the cafe where she worked, her supervisor Emma pulled her aside. "Sarah, there's a man here who said he knows you. He came yesterday too, but you had left early to pick up Jamie." Sarah frowned. "What man?" "Older, well-dressed. He said his name is William. He's been sitting at the corner table for about 2 hours, just drinking coffee and working on his laptop." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "What did he say he wanted?" "He just asked what time you worked and if he could wait to talk to you." Sarah looked in the direction Emma had indicated, and there he was, exactly as Emma had described. When he saw her, he discreetly waved and pointed to the empty chair in front of him. "You can attend to him," Emma said. "He's been quiet today." Sarah approached the table, wiping her nervous hands on her apron. "William? What are you doing here?" "Hi, Sarah. Sorry for showing up at your work. I know it might seem strange, but I needed to talk to you." She sat down hesitantly. "Is everything okay? Did something happen?" Actually, something did. William closed the laptop and looked at her directly. "I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation." "Why?" William sighed, running a hand through his gray hair. "Sarah, can I be direct with you?" "Sure. I'd like to help you. With the car, specifically." Sarah froze. "What do you mean?" "When you mentioned that having a reliable car would make the biggest difference in your life, that stayed with me. And I'm in a position where I can help with that." Sarah's face immediately closed off. "William, I don't. Please, let me finish." He leaned forward, his voice urgent but gentle. "I'm not talking about charity. I'm talking about an exchange." "What kind of exchange?" William hesitated, clearly choosing his words carefully. "I'm working on a project. A documentary about genuine human connections, about people who make a difference in others' lives without expecting anything in return. You did that for me the night we met." Sarah studied him, confused. "I don't understand." "I'd like to include your story in the project. Obviously, with your full permission and control over how you're portrayed. In exchange, I'd take care of your car, full repair or replacement, whatever you need." "You want to film me?" Sarah's voice came out louder than she intended, making a few people at nearby tables glance over. "Not exactly film you, but document your story. How a single mother manages to do so much with so little. How you find space for kindness even when your own life is hard." Sarah stood up abruptly. "I need to get back to work." Sarah, wait. No. Her voice was firm now, laden with years of experience being studied by social workers, counselors, and other well-intentioned people who wanted to understand her situation. I'm not a charity project. And I'm not a case study to make you feel better about the world. William stood up too, clearly realizing he had stepped on a sensitive topic. That's not it. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. Sarah started walking away, but turned one last time. Thanks for the offer, but I don't need your help. And I definitely don't need someone documenting how inspiring I am in my poverty. She walked away before William could respond, her heart pounding with anger and humiliation. How had she been so naive? Of course, there was something behind his kindness. There always was. For the rest of her shift, Sarah was distracted and irritated. Emma noticed her mood and left her alone, but Sarah could feel the concerned glances from her supervisor. William stayed for another hour before leaving, and Sarah found herself avoiding looking in his direction. When she finally finished her shift at 8 p.m., Sarah found William waiting in the parking lot next to her Honda. Sarah, please. 5 minutes. William, I said. You said you didn't need my help. And you're right, you don't. But I need yours. The response took her by surprise. What do you mean? Let me explain better. Maybe I made it sound like you were a subject of study, but that's not it. William leaned against his own car, a discreet black SUV she hadn't noticed before. Do you remember me saying I was on a journey to figure out who I really am? I remember. Part of that journey involves trying to understand how people like you manage to maintain their humanity in tough circumstances. Not because you're different or special in a way that makes you subjects of study, but because you're different in a way that teaches me something about how I'd like to live. Sarah crossed her arms. I still don't understand why that requires a documentary. Because. William paused, clearly struggling with something internal. Because I've spent the last 15 years of my life building a company worth billions of dollars. And in the process, I completely forgot how to be a decent human being. The confession came out simple and direct, without drama, but it carried a weight that made Sarah really look at him for the first time since the conversation had started. Billions? She repeated. Yes. And before you think this changes anything between us, I want you to know that in these last few days, talking to you, I've felt more connected to another human being than I've felt in years. Sarah studied him, looking for signs of manipulation or condescension, but finding only weary sincerity. So when you offered help with the car, it was because I want to help. Period. The documentary is secondary, and if you don't want to participate in it, I completely understand. But, Sarah. He took a step toward her. Let me help with the car. Not as charity, not as part of any project, but because you helped me when I needed it, and now I can give back. William, I can't accept thousands of dollars from a practically stranger. Why not? The question caught her off guard. What do you mean, why not? Seriously. Why can't you? It's not like I'm going to miss the money. And it's not like you don't deserve to have a reliable car. Sarah felt familiar tears of frustration well up. Because when you accept things like that from people, they expect things in return. And when you can't give what they expect, they make you feel like you're ungrateful or like you owe them something. William finished the sentence softly. Exactly. Sarah, can I ask who hurt you so much that you can't accept genuine help? The question hit like a punch to the stomach. Sarah felt exposed, as if William could see through all the layers of protection she had built over the years. Many people, she finally said. My parents, who offered help but always came with sermons about my bad choices. Marcus, who promised support but disappeared when he realized that support meant real sacrifice. Social workers who wanted to help but treated Jamie and me like numbers on a spreadsheet. And now you think I'm just another one of them? Sarah looked at him, really looked. She saw the tiredness in his eyes that mirrored her own, saw the sincerity she had learned to recognize through years of distinguishing between real help and help that came with strings attached. I don't know what to think of you, William. That's fair. But can I make a suggestion? What? How about you let me fix your car, and in exchange, you teach me something? Teach you what? How to live with real courage. How to find joy in small things. How to be a good person even when the world isn't being good to you. Sarah laughed, but it was a softer sound this time. You think I know those things? I know you do. You stop to help strangers in the rain when you have 1,000 things of your own to worry about. You raise a child who is kind and curious despite all the hardships. You find ways to smile even when you're obviously struggling. Sarah remained silent for a long moment, part of her wanting to accept the offer and part of her still resisting. If I say yes, she finally said, what are the rules? What rules would you like? You can't treat me like a charity project. If I get uncomfortable with anything, I can stop. And Jamie can't be involved without my explicit permission. Done. Anything else? Let me do something in return. Even if it's something small. William smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him in that conversation. Actually, there is something you can do. What? Keep being exactly who you are. Keep showing me how it's possible to maintain faith in humanity even when life is hard. Sarah extended her hand. Deal. But William? Yes. If you disappoint me or make me feel like a charity case, I'm out. And no amount of money will make me come back. William shook her hand, and Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, the possibility that maybe, just maybe, not all help came with a price she couldn't afford. Sometimes life changes through grand, dramatic gestures. Other times, it changes through small acts of kindness that gradually rebuild our faith in the world. The mechanic looked at Sarah as if she had two heads when she showed up at the shop the next morning with William by her side. What do you want me to do to the Honda? Tony Martelli had been Sarah's mechanic for 3 years, always finding cheap, temporary solutions to keep it running. Everything necessary to make it run perfectly, William repeated calmly. Engine, transmission, brakes, tires, electrical system. Whatever needs to be replaced or fixed. Tony scratched his graying beard. My friend, this is going to cost more than the car is worth. It'd be cheaper to buy another one. Then help her find another car. Something reliable, safe, with a good warranty. Sarah watched the exchange, still processing that this was actually happening. She had spent the whole night awake, alternating between excitement and anxiety about her decision to accept William's help. Sarah, Tony turned to her. Are you sure about this? Because if your friend here is serious, we're talking about $15,000 to $20,000. Sarah looked at William, who simply nodded reassuringly. I'm sure, Tony. 2 hours later, Sarah was signing papers for a 2019 Honda CR-V with only 40,000 kilometers on it. It had leather interior, a Bluetooth sound system, and, luxury of luxuries, seat warmers. Can I ask you something? She said to William as they left the dealership. Ask as many as you want. Why is this so easy for you? $20,000 like it's nothing. William stopped in the parking lot, looking at her new car. Can I be completely honest? Please. Because for years, I spent way more than that on things that meant nothing. Business dinners that cost $1,000 and I forgot the next day. Watches I never wear. Art I don't even look at anymore. He turned to face her. But seeing your face when you realized the seat warmer works? That's worth more than anything I've ever bought for myself. Sarah felt unexpected tears burn in her eyes. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to. But Sarah? Yes? Now can you tell me more about your story? For the documentary? Sarah took a deep breath. It was part of the deal, and honestly, after what William had just done, she felt she could trust him. Okay. But let's take it slow. They met 3 days later at High Park, on a Saturday afternoon when Sarah didn't have to work. Jamie played on the playground while they sat on a nearby bench, and a small, discreet film crew captured everything from a distance. Tell me about the day you decided you were going to raise Jamie alone, William said, his voice soft and encouraging. Sarah watched her son happily climbing the jungle gym, completely unaware that the conversation was shaping his story for the world. It wasn't really a decision, she began. It was more like accepting a reality I'd been avoiding for months. How so? Marcus started becoming absent when Jamie was about 6 months old. First, it was urgent work calls on weekends. Then, it was projects that kept him out late. I knew he was going out, but I kept pretending it was work because admitting the truth meant facing that I was going to be alone. William nodded, allowing her to process the emotions the memories brought up. The exact day was a Tuesday. Jamie had a high fever, and I was desperate, trying to reach Marcus for hours. When he finally answered, I could hear music and laughter in the background. He was at a bar. What did you say to him? I asked if he could come home because Jamie was sick and I was scared. And he said. Sarah paused, the pain still fresh after all these years. He said I was being dramatic, that kids get sick all the time, and that he had a life too. How did you react? I hung up the phone and never asked him for help again. I took Jamie to the hospital by myself that night. It was just an ear infection, but I didn't know. And driving back home at 3 a.m., with Jamie asleep in the back seat, I realized that if I could do that alone, I could do anything alone. And you did. I did. But. Sarah hesitated. But sometimes I wonder if I taught myself to be too independent. If I built walls so high that even good people can't get in. William stayed silent for a moment, watching Jamie, who was now making friends with a younger girl trying to climb the slide. Look at that, he pointed at the kids. Sarah looked and saw Jamie patiently helping the girl, offering her his hand and encouraging her to try again. He learned that from you, William said softly. The kindness, the patience, the impulse to help. You didn't build walls that high, Sarah. You just learned to be careful about who you let in. For the next 2 hours, they talked about everything, about the night Sarah cried from exhaustion in the shower so Jamie wouldn't hear, about the small triumphs like when Jamie learned to read, about the moments of doubt when she wondered if she was doing everything wrong. Can I ask you a personal question? Sarah said when the film crew took a break. Of course. Why are you really doing this? And don't give me the rehearsed answer about reconnecting with your humanity. The real answer. William laughed, but it was a sad sound. The real answer is that my wife died last year. Sarah felt her heart tighten. William, I'm so sorry. Margaret. We were married for 25 years. And in the last 5 years of our marriage, she kept telling me I had forgotten who I was. That business success had swallowed the man she fell in love with. And did you believe her? Not at the time. I thought she was being dramatic, that she was jealous of my success. William ran a hand through his hair. After she died, I started reviewing our conversations. And I realized she was right. I had stopped seeing people as people. They were resources, connections, opportunities. And the documentary is going to change that? I hope so. I hope it reminds me how to be human again. And I hope it shows others like me that it's possible to find our way back. Sarah studied his face, seeing the vulnerability he rarely showed. Margaret would have liked you, he said suddenly. Why? Because you're everything she tried to remind me existed in the world. Genuine kindness. Quiet strength. The ability to love fully even when life is hard. That night, after Jamie went to bed, Sarah sat on her couch, in the same small apartment, but now with the security of knowing her car wouldn't leave her stranded, and thought about the subtle changes in her life. It wasn't just the car. It was the way she had started smiling more easily. How she had begun to see herself through William's eyes, not as someone who was merely surviving, but as someone living with real courage. Her phone rang. It was a message from William. Thank you for today. You're helping me more than you know. Sarah typed and deleted several responses before settling on something simple. Thank you for letting me help. The reply came almost immediately. That's what people who care for each other do. Sarah stared at the message for a long time. People who care for each other. When was the last time she had allowed herself to be in that category with someone other than Jamie? That same night, William was in his hotel room, editing the footage from the day. But he wasn't just documenting Sarah's story, he was documenting his own transformation. Day 31 of the journey, he typed in his notes. Today I realized something important. I'm not just filming Sarah to show that human kindness still exists. I'm filming her to learn how to become the person Margaret fell in love with. Sarah is teaching me that real strength isn't about never needing help, it's about knowing when to accept help and when to offer it. He paused, looking out the window at the city where Sarah was probably tucking Jamie into bed, planning another day of hard work, but now with a little less weight on her shoulders. I think I'm starting to understand what Margaret was trying to tell me. True success isn't measured by what you accumulate, but by what you give. And it's not measured by what you achieve alone, but by the genuine connections you build. William closed the laptop, knowing the journey was far from over. But for the first time in years, he was eager to see where it would lead, not just for his documentary, but for his own soul. The best stories don't end with "and they lived happily ever after." They end with "and then they learned how to really live." 2 months after the meeting at Hyde Park, Sarah stood in front of the bathroom mirror in her apartment, trying to decide if she was nervous or excited. Probably both. It was the night of William's private documentary screening. He had rented a small theater in downtown Toronto and invited only the people who had participated in the project, along with a few close friends and colleagues. "Mom, you look pretty." Jamie appeared in the bathroom doorway, wearing the blue dress shirt she had bought specially for the occasion. "Thank you, sweetie. You look very dapper yourself." It was true. In the past few weeks, Jamie had grown in a way that surprised Sarah. Maybe it was the stability the reliable car had brought to their lives, or maybe it was the fact that Sarah was smiling more and worrying less. Whatever the cause, her son seemed more confident, happier. "Can I ask you something?" Jamie sat on the edge of the bathtub while Sarah applied a bit of mascara, a luxury she hadn't allowed herself in years. "Of course. Is William going to be there tonight?" "He is." "Does he like you?" The question caught her off guard. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Like how men like women in movies." "Does he look at you the same way the prince looks at the princess?" Sarah laughed but felt her face warm. "Jamie, William, and I are friends." "Good friends." "Okay." Jamie jumped off the tub. But I think he likes you. And I like him too. When they arrived at the theater, Sarah was surprised by how many people were there. She recognized a few faces, other participants of the documentary that William had introduced her to over the weeks of filming. There was Marie, the nurse who stopped to help in a car accident on her way home, Robert, the veteran who spent his weekends serving soup to the homeless, and David, the teenager who used his allowance to buy food for abandoned dogs. Sarah. William appeared beside her, genuinely happy to see her. You made it. We wouldn't miss it for anything, she replied, and realized it was true. Over the past few months, the footage had become an important part of her life, not just because of the story it was telling, but because of the friendship that had developed. Jamie, my friend. William crouched to get to eye level with the boy. How's your mom's car? It's amazing. The seats heat up, and there's a place to put my juice, and the radio works all the time. William laughed. I'm glad to hear that. And how's daycare? Really good. I told everyone about you making movies about good people. Thanks for spreading the word. While Jamie went to explore the lobby with the other kids, William turned to Sarah. How are you feeling? Nervous? A little. It's strange knowing my life is going to be on a big screen. Sarah, let me tell you one thing. You're going to see yourself the way I see you. As an extraordinary person doing extraordinary things every day. Before she could respond, the lobby lights flickered, signaling it was time to go inside. The documentary was titled Kindness Without an Audience and was 52 minutes long. Sarah held her breath when her section started, showing her on that first rainy night stopping to help William. But as she watched, she realized William had captured something she hadn't seen herself. It wasn't just her struggle as a single mother, it was her grace under pressure, her ability to find joy in small moments, her unshakable determination to give Jamie a life full of love, even when everything else was uncertain. There was one scene in particular that made her cry. It was Jamie playing in the park while she and William talked, and the camera had captured a moment when Jamie helped a younger child. The narrator, William's soft voice, said, Sarah taught me that true wealth is not in what you have, but in what you give. And that real courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to do what is right, even when you're scared. When the lights came back on, the room was silent for a moment before bursting into applause. Sarah was surprised to realize that several people were crying. How do you feel? William whispered to her. Like for the first time in a long time, someone really saw me. Not just my problems or my struggles, but who I really am. During the reception after the screening, Sarah was approached by several people. One woman, in particular, made a deep impression on her. Sorry to intrude, said the gray-haired lady. But I wanted to thank you. Thank me for what? I'm a single mom too. Or I was, my kids are adults now. But watching your story, I remembered something I had forgotten, that what we did was extraordinary. For years, I thought I had just survived. You showed me that I had actually triumphed. Sarah felt tears in her eyes. Thank you for telling me that. Later, when the crowd had thinned and Jamie was napping on an armchair, Sarah and William met outside the theater. So, he said, what's next? For you or for me? For both of us. Sarah thought for a moment. Honestly? I think now I just keep living my life. But maybe with a little less fear. Less fear of what? Of accepting help when I need it. Of trusting that not everyone has hidden motives. Of believing I deserve good things. William nodded. And you? What's next for William Chin, the recovering billionaire? He laughed. I think I'll try to apply what I've learned from making this film to real life. Maybe start a foundation that really helps single mothers, not just with money, but with real support. Maybe spend more time with my own daughter, whom I neglected for years in favor of business. That sounds like a solid plan. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the city lights. Sarah, can I ask you something? Of course. If I weren't who I am, if I were just an ordinary guy with an ordinary job, would you want to have dinner with me sometime? The question completely caught her off guard. William. Sorry. That was inappropriate. Forget I asked. No, it wasn't inappropriate. It's just. Sarah paused, trying to find the right words. It's just that for the first time in 5 years, I'm in a position where I can actually consider what I want, not just what I need. And that's scary. And what do you want? Sarah looked at him, really looked at him. She saw not the billionaire who had solved her problems with money, but the man who had listened to her story with compassion, who had played with her son like it was natural, who had become an important part of her life in a way she hadn't expected. I want to have dinner with you, she finally said. But slowly. And as equals. As equals? Like two people who have helped each other find parts of themselves that they'd lost. William smiled, not the polished smile she had seen on that first night, but something genuine and full of possibilities. That sounds perfect. 1 year later. Sarah opened the door to her new apartment, not much bigger than the previous one, but in a better neighborhood, with windows that sealed properly, and smiled when she saw William helping Jamie with his homework at the kitchen table. Hi, Mom. Jamie ran over to hug her. William taught me a new word today, perseverance. That's a very good word, Sarah said, kissing the top of her son's head. It means to keep trying even when things are hard, Jamie explained proudly. Very good. Sarah looked at William, who was tidying up the school books. And how was your day? Great. Jamie taught me how to make paper airplanes that really fly, and I helped him with math. That's how it had been for the past 6 months, not a fairy tale romance, but something better, a real partnership between two people who had learned that accepting help and offering help were two sides of the same coin. William had changed her life in practical ways. She now worked part-time as the coordinator for his foundation for single-parent families, a job that paid well and gave her purpose. But more importantly, he had changed her perspective on herself. And Sarah had changed William's life too. Through her, he had rediscovered how to live authentically, how to find joy in small moments, how to love without trying to control. Jamie, William said as they finished tidying up, how about we make pizza for dinner? With pepperoni? With whatever you want. As they headed to the kitchen, Sarah found herself thinking about how life had a strange way of placing the right people in your path at the right time. William had stopped on that rainy night not just because his motorcycle had broken down, but because they both needed something that only they could find in each other. She had learned that real strength didn't mean never needing help. It meant knowing when to ask for help, when to accept help, and when to offer it. And William had learned that true success wasn't in what you accumulated, but in what you built, relationships, community, love. Mom, Jamie called from the kitchen, come see. William's trying to spin the pizza dough in the air. Sarah laughed, hearing the sound of something falling to the floor followed by the laughter of two of her favorite men. Some stories end with grand romantic gestures or dramatic transformations. But the best stories, the real ones, end with small moments of shared joy, with people choosing every day to be better for one another. And as Sarah walked to the kitchen to help clean up the pizza dough from the floor, she knew her story was just beginning. If this story touched your heart, leave a like and subscribe for more stories about courage, kindness, and second chances. Dizzy. In the comments, tell us, what was the most emotional moment of this journey for you?